Good morning. I'm calling to order this meeting of the House Workforce Development, Labor and Economic Development, Finance and Policy Committee. Glad to have everybody with us. I understand this is being broadcast to another room in the Capitol as well, and so welcome to those joining us from there. We do have a quorum. I had intended to perhaps project this later, but it's up now. We have a picture of a baby Safa and Representative Hussein. Safa was born just about a little over a week ago, I think 9 days ago, Representative Hussein, and we give you congratulations. He had given permission to have this photo be shared in a good way to start the meeting. Yes.
Yay.
So, yes, so exciting. Yes, and applause for our representatives coming in, too.
They're coming in a little late. Yeah. Thank you very much. Good morning. Yeah.
I know traffic day was just horrible. I heard this from multiple members, I think including at least one who's not yet joining us. And, yeah, we can take that down. So, Representative Hussein, so happy for you. And for your family. So, members, we have got a lot of business, and I think I'll talk about the budget bill. We'll have to do some discussion explanation shortly, but we'll knock out a couple pieces of business first. So, I wonder, Chair Baker, perhaps if you're willing to move the minutes from our meeting of April 10th.
I will, Mr. Chair, so moved.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Members, any discussion, anything, additions, corrections, questions about the minutes? Not seeing any. All in favor of approval of our minutes on April 10th, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay. The motion passes, and minutes are adopted. And then, members, we have one bill that we're going to discuss now. So Chair Baker is going to make his way up, and then again we'll have quite a discussion about the second bill on our agenda. But first, Chair Baker moves House File 3228 to be recommended for placement on the General Register. I don't believe that there are any. Or perhaps there. I'm often wrong about this, but nope, there are no amendments. And so, Chair Baker, as you're ready. Please proceed with presenting House File 3228.
I have them.
Sounds good, Mr. Chair. Members, thank you so much. Again, House File 3228 is before the committee. This is really just kind of a Workers' Compensation Advisory Council amendments that we do. This is again done with the 4 legislative liaisons on the council. I serve as one of them. Senator Utke, Senator McEwen, and Representative Berg are on the council, and we bring this forward to the committee. I think I'll just let Jessica kind of explain the details, Mr. Chair. We've got the overview points, but it's very technical, very non-controversial. So I'll just turn it over to the expert in the room.
Yeah, please, if you can identify yourself and proceed.
Good morning, Chair, members. My name is Jessica Stimick, Assistant Commissioner at the Department of Labor and Industry. So as required by law, the council is comprised of equal numbers of members representing business and members of labor. The goal of the Workers' Compensation Advisory Council is to improve the workers' compensation process for businesses and injured workers. The provisions of this bill as introduced were unanimously approved by the council, and the bill as introduced includes a clarification concerning who qualifies as an employee for purposes of workers' compensation related to certain direct care programs under the Minnesota Department of Human Services. That's in Section 1. Clarification of the definition of a corporate executive officer related to workers' compensation insurance requirements. Those are in Sections 2 and 3. Clarification related to the payment for nursing services provided by a household member of an injured worker in Sections 4 and 7. Technical changes to certain filing provisions in Chapter 176 in Sections 5 and 8. Increasing the limit of the amount of workers' compensation benefits that are non-assignable, that is in Section 6. And in Section 9, we have a repeal of Minnesota Rules Part 5220, 2840, which was previously fully codified into statute. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of this bill, and I'm available for any questions.
Thank you, Commissioner. Let's see if anybody else wants to testify on the bill, first of all. Nice. Anybody think you're all here for the other bill? And so any member questions or discussions, questions or comments? And not seeing any, I'm grateful to you, Chair Baker, and to Representative Berg for your service on the council. Really appreciate that, and any final comments that you have, Mr. Chair.
No, thank you very much, members, for this. I believe, Mr. Chair, this is going to the General Register.
That's correct. Yep.
Okay, so again, just a policy bill here. Again, just so folks are aware, this council is made up of labor and employers and have always worked really well in a bipartisan fashion. This is how kind of the best of what we do around here. So I just want to thank you for your support and looking forward to the vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Baker. And with that, Chair Baker renews his motion that House File 3228 be recommended for placement on the general register. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion passes, and we are sending 3228 to the general register. So members and members of the public, so we turn to the next bill on the agenda, and I want to just make some just kind of process comments to make sure we all understand where things go here. So House File 2441, the bill before us today, we were going to be adopting an amendment to convert that bill into our committee's budget bill, at least the content of that bill. Folks may recall that our committee was given a budget target of a $50 million cut from base for both this biennium and the next biennium. We also were prohibited under that budget resolution from spending anything net from the Workforce Development Fund. So that put our target in total and the amount of spending we're able to do at well over $100 million below our Senate counterparts and colleagues. Chair Baker and I had several weeks of discussion and work on our bill and the budget bill. We hit a couple small snags that we ended up working with our leadership on, and that process took a lot longer than either chair wanted to do. In the meantime, you may recall that at our last meeting, the one that we just adopted the minutes for, I believe it was that meeting anyway, we passed House File 2440 out of our committee as a bill that we sent to Ways and Means. That bill is going to be up, 2440 will be up this afternoon. I believe it's at 3 p.m. in the Ways and Means Committee, where that bill will have the content of the budget agreement be put on that bill, and that bill will then move forward and be the bill that goes through the House floor and goes to conference. And so the bill, it was very important to both chairs that we have the content of the budget be in our committee, that we have testimony, which we're about to have. We do a walkthrough, so actually going to do the walkthrough first, then hear testimony, consider amendments if there are some. We'll get to that, and have our committee vote the content out. So again, this bill, we expect 2441 to leave our committee, be sent to Ways and Means, but because it's after deadline, this bill cannot be the one that actually becomes the budget bill, so it'll be 2440 this afternoon that does. Hopefully folks are tracking that. We'll see if there are questions from members. But I just want to make sure we have that set from a process perspective, and we'll talk more about the content. Chair, anything that you want to add about any of that, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good overview. I just want to maybe just, again, we'll do our thank yous at the end, but I think this is our last committee meeting as a whole, unless we have some informational hearings or something down the road if there's a special situation. But this was really about hearing from the public today. This is one of the things that Chair Pinto and I really felt strongly, that we wanted to make sure that even though we had our work done by the deadlines, we followed all the procedures properly, we didn't have the ability, though, to get all of this, some of the technical stuff and the policy things that we needed to work through in a manner that we felt was going to be fair to everybody. When you work in a shared government system, we have to be patient. We have to really work through the details of a lot of these things, so we find ourselves here a little later than we wanted to. But public testimony is the most important thing we're going to hear today. And the only other thing I want to comment on is just because we didn't have the budget target that the other body had doesn't mean we don't care about a lot of the projects out there, a lot of the workforce programs. We will hear today that maybe the decisions that Chair Pinto and I and the committee hopefully will endorse today is not perfect, but we're going to find ways of making it better as this bill moves along. So just want to say thank you for that, for being here this morning, and we'll get ready to hear from testimony. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Chair Baker. Yeah, and speaking of things not being perfect, I think Chair Baker and I will probably say this at a couple different points too. This bill would probably look different if one of us was the chair. I know Chair Baker, the bill would look different if he was the sole chair. If I was as well, the bill would look quite different. This is, of course, we're doing something that's never been done in the history of our state, which is to have co-chairs in a tie situation. And so sorting that through is something we've done, and I think proud of the work that we've done together. Are there questions that folks have about the process? Because this can get a little confusing. I see Representative Schultz. Yeah, Representative Schultz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think the thing that I'm most confused by is the amendments and how we're dealing with those and how that will ultimately get into the appropriate bill.
Why don't we get to that when we get to the amendment section, Representative Schultz? Because we've got a fair amount. We'll do a walkthrough. We'll have testimony, and then and please, if I were to forget, please remind me when we get to that section. All right, thank you. And then any other questions about process? Anybody has? Okay, so seeing none, so then what we're going to do is ask our terrific House Research and House Fiscal team, Ms. Shalene and Ms. Eng, and we've been, just I want to say this repeatedly, very grateful, both chairs are, for all of your work. We'll ask you to walk through the bill, and actually, you know, we should probably do this is get in front of us. So Chair Baker, will you move House File 2441 for re-referral to the Committee on Ways and Means?
So moved.
Thank you. And I think we should probably at this time also move the A25-0074 amendment as well. And so let's do that. Thank you, Chair. Okay, in that case, we'll have Ms. Shalene. Looks like you're going first, or Ms. Eng? Okay.
Mr. Chair and members, Ashley Eng of House Fiscal. I will be starting with the spreadsheet walkthrough, and the first one I will go through is the one in the top left corner titled Workforce and Economic Development, Finance and Policy. Like the chair said, the target for this committee was a reduction of $50 million per biennium from the base. And now, looking at the columns on the right, there's the change from February. This would be the change from base. And the net impact on line 2 is a reduction in this spreadsheet of $53,896,000. So this includes cuts and increased spending for this spreadsheet. Of this amount, there was a cut of $52,746,000 for deed, that's on line 3. An appropriation to the Department of Children, Youth, and Families of $500,000 each biennium. And then on line 6, there's a cut of $1,650,000 each biennium from Explore Minnesota Tourism. Looking down, going through a little bit of the details here, I'm just looking at the change from February columns. On line 31, that is the $500,000 each biennium for the Department of Children, Youth, and Families. This is child care improvement grants. Looking on page 2. Getting into the details of the cuts, line 51, there's a $2,500,000 cut each biennium from the Greater Minnesota Business Development Public Infrastructure. Line 64, there's a $1,500,000 cut each biennium from contaminated site cleanup. Line 72, there's a $16 million cut from the Job Creation Fund, and this would be all of the base funding each biennium. On line 73, there's a $24,740,000 cut from the Minnesota Investment Fund. This would be all of the funding for each biennium. On line 77, there's a $2 million cut from the Redevelopment Grant Program. On line 83, there's a $8,390,000 cut each biennium from the Job Skills Partnership Program. Skipping down to page 4, there's a $2 million cut from the CAN Navigate program each biennium, and that is all of the base funding. And then on line 184, there's a $2,700,000 cut from the Job Skills Partnership training grants, and this would be all of the funding for that. And this is from the Workforce Development Fund. There was one change in the Workforce Development Fund in this budget. So into the Employment and Training Division. On line 201, there was $1 million cut from the Rural Career Counseling Coordinators each biennium. And now on line 212, there's an increase to the Pathways to Prosperity program of $2,888,000 each biennium. There's an increase in of $250,000 each biennium to the self-support services and job training grants. And then there's a increase of $1,500,000 each biennium to the Youth at Work competitive grant program. On line 294, that's page 7. There's a $500,000 increase or appropriation to each biennium to the online early childhood educator training. On line 295, there's $896,000 each biennium towards STEM learning projects. And on line 296 here, there's a reduction from the CAN Train program, all of the base funding, $4 million. Jumping down to the General Support Services Division, on line 399, there was an operating increase implemented in the current biennium, which had a reduction of $1,650,000 each biennium. Down to the Vocational Rehabilitation Services Division, on line 424, there's a $5 million increase each biennium towards the division. Then down to Explore Minnesota Tourism on line 458, this is page 9. There's a $1,650,000 reduction to Explore Minnesota Film. That is all the base funding. And that wraps up that spreadsheet. So now I will turn to the labor spreadsheet. And looking at the gray columns, this is the change from the February forecast, or the change from the base budget. You can see that there's a $3,896,000 increase, which offsets the reduction from the deed spreadsheet. So there's that from the general fund, and then on line 26, you can see a $4,078,000 each biennium increase to the Department of Labor and Industry from the Workers' Compensation Fund, as well as the $731,000 increase in 26-27, and then $664,000 increase in 28-29 to the Workers' Compensation Court of Appeals. That is an operating increase. So of the workers' compensation, on line 47, you can see that there's the operating increase for the department. And of the general fund, you can see on line 62, there's $570,000 each biennium for the worker misclassification enforcement increase. And on line 63, there's a $326,000 each biennium for the worker misclassification report. Jumping down to page 3, there on line 102, there is $3 million each biennium for teacher registered apprenticeship grants. And then finally on line 120, there's the $731,000 in 26-27, and then $664,000 in 28-29 for the operating increase for the Workers' Compensation Court of Appeals. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. And members, we'll have discussion and comments later, but if there are clarifying questions along the way for either Ms. Enger or Ms. Shalene, please ask. And I'm not seeing anybody, so we'll move on to Ms. Shalene.
Chair and members, Anna Shalene, House Research. I'm going to do a very high-level walkthrough of the language in the bill. Keep it short. So starting on page 1 of the bill, Article 1 is appropriations. Ms. Eng has just covered the changes there. Moving on to page 22 of the bill, Article 2, this is a whole article of modifications to prior appropriations that were made in 2023 and 2024, extending a few, making some technical corrections. I won't get into the details of any of those unless anyone has questions about specific items. Article 3, this is the deed policy section. Most of this language is fairly technical requests from the governor. Sections 1 through 4, this begins on page 83. 1 through 4 are all, 1 through 6 are all technical changes requested by the governor to various programs. Section 7 is new language. This allows the Job Skills Partnership Board, which statutorily has access to spend the Workforce Development Fund. It allows them to spend that money in March rather than, or in September rather than waiting until March. This was in response to some of the funding changes in the spreadsheet. Sections 8 through 9 are changes to the Youth at Work Grants Program to allow mentorship and pre-employment services to count for that competitive grant program. Section 10 is another technical change about workforce outcomes. Sections 11 through 15 are changes to explore Minnesota's mission language to conform to changes passed in prior years. Sections 16 and 17 are technical changes to blind vending provisions. 18 to parking revenue clarification. And Section 19 repeals 2 mandatory reports to the legislature that are quite expensive and duplicate other information provided in other ways. Article 4, this is the DLI policy article. This begins on page 94. Section 1 is a technical fix requested by the governor. Sections 2 through 3 are from the Representative Agbaje bill. This narrows the scope of the Nursing Home Workforce Standards Board so that veterans' homes and nursing homes run by tribal entities are no longer included in the scope of the board. Section 4 on page 94. This is language allowing covenants not to compete in certain situations. This is not the final language. That will be in the Ways and Means bill later today. It was not ready in time for this hearing. Section 5 is a technical correction to the name of an accrediting body. Sections 6 through 7 are about training for broadband installers. This reflects an agreement between different parties. Sections 8 through 9 create low voltage class 4 for electrical systems. And section 10 requires an annual report to the legislature about worker misclassification. That is the very high level overview of the policy in the bill. As you can see, almost all of it is technical requests from the governor. If anyone has questions, I am available.
Any questions for our fabulous staff? And as Ms. Charlene said, that section 4 of Article 4 regarding non-compete, there'll be slightly updated language in the Ways and Means Committee later today, but otherwise this matches, my understanding is what's in House File 2440. Representative Johnson, do you have your question? No, okay. Let's see if anybody does. All right. So in that case, we will then move to testimony. As we do that, I want to point out that there's a pretty thick packet of letters and handouts for folks to look at. Please have that in mind. We have quite an extensive list of folks who signed up. I'm just looking for my list here. And so we're going to ask folks to keep it to just a couple minutes. I'm going to give the agency representatives a little bit longer because of just the extent of the items in the bill that relate to you. And so we will start off with Commissioner Blissenbach and then have Commissioner Rowe be ready to go. Maybe you can make your way up there. And as each person finishes, the next person on the list, I'll ask you to make your way up. And so Commissioner Blissenbach, welcome to you. As I say, we'll give you a couple extra minutes, but we'll ask everybody if you can keep things fairly concise. Welcome, please identify yourself, and so glad to have you with us. Proceed.
Thank you, Chair Pinto. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. I did try to cut to be under the 2 minutes, so I'll see if I get there. My name is Nicole Blissenbach, and I'm the Commissioner of the Department of Labor and Industry. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on House File 2441. First, I want to thank Representative Pinto and Representative Baker for including several of the department's priorities in this bill, including funding for the misclassification enforcement, the workers' compensation operating adjustment, the extension of the funding for the single egress stairway apartment building report, funding for teacher registered apprenticeship grants, the department's technical provisions in Article 4, and the ability for the department to seek temporary restraining orders. I would also like to thank the chairs for including the integration of Class 4 electrical systems in Article 4, Sections 8 and 9. However, this bill only includes the policy language and does not include the Class 4 electrical fee that the department needs to charge to fund the inspection of these systems. Before transitioning to priorities that are not included in the bill, I want to note that the bill includes a worker misclassification report, and while the department is supportive of analyzing the costs of misclassification and developing this report, sufficient funding is necessary. The department is concerned about the absence of several of its key priorities, including the general fund operating adjustment, funding for grants to certified worker organizations, policy that strengthens and clarifies mandatory break laws, and the construction codes and licensing fee alignment proposal. The CCLD fee alignment proposal is especially important. The Construction Codes and Licensing Division at DLI operates on a fee-for-service basis, and most units in the department's proposal have not seen fee increases since 2007. Leaving fees at current levels would result in significant staffing cuts and increased wait times for critical services like electrical inspections, plumbing plan review, boiler inspections, elevator inspections, and inspections of new manufactured homes upon installation. By way of example, some of the worst impacts would include plumbing plan review wait times that would increase to a minimum of 15 weeks, resulting in significant construction project delays across the state. Electrical inspections are currently provided within 2 days of a request, but without these fee increases, staffing cuts would result in delays of 2 weeks across much of the state and limited availability of virtual inspections. Boiler installation and annual safety inspections for in-service boilers, pressure vessels, and boats for hire would face extended delays. DLI's administration of the HUD Manufactured Home Program would need to be turned back to the federal government. In closing, the bill before the committee makes several critical investments, especially in teacher-registered apprenticeship and misclassification enforcement. However, it falls short by not including the reasonable and necessary construction code and licensing fee adjustments, which have especially strong support among construction industry stakeholders. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on House File 2441.
Thank you, Commissioner, and I'll ask Commissioner Roque to come up, and Director McGinty, you could maybe sit in the other seat, and that way you'll be ready to go once the Commissioner's done. And Commissioner, glad to have you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Evan Ron. I'm Deputy Commissioner for Workforce Services at the Department of Employment and Economic Development. Thank you for the opportunity to present the agency's perspective on the House Workforce, Labor, and Economic Development Omnibus Bill. First, want to recognize the difficult budgetary moment that we are in and thank the committee for all of your work in crafting this package. In particular, thank you for including several items that align with the governor's recommendations for DEED. These items include modifications to the Minnesota Forward Fund, expansion of the definition of credential for workforce reporting, and several other DEED policy items which will improve efficiency and drive outcomes. Governor Walz and Lieutenant Governor Flanagan proposed a reasonable and measured budget which included narrow reductions to help tackle the projected budgetary imbalance coupled with targeted investments to help address the state's key challenges. There are several of these investments and recommendations that we would encourage you to include in the remaining weeks of session. These include the Service to Success Initiative, the Drive for 5 Workforce Initiative, the full funding recommendation for vocational rehabilitation services, and the operating adjustment. Each of these items plays an important role in helping the state tackle one of its biggest challenges, the workforce shortage across the state of Minnesota. Additionally, I would strongly caution against the heavy-handed cuts to critical economic development programs like the Minnesota Investment Fund and the Job Creation Fund. These strategic programs work to drive business expansions that create and retain high-wage jobs, resulting in an increased tax base for communities statewide. These programs are highly successful. In 2024, MIF and JCF created and retained near 4,885 jobs, the highest in the program's history, and leveraged nearly $1 billion in private investment. They're a good investment for Minnesota. The governor proposed several strategic cuts to DEED programs as part of an overall approach to continued fiscal responsibility, and we would encourage the committee, as the process plays out, to consider those. Further details are available in the written testimony that DEED submitted as part of your committee packet. In conclusion, I appreciate your efforts to meet the challenging work ahead of us and look forward to continued collaboration in helping to craft a jobs bill that empowers a Minnesota economy that works for everyone. Thank you.
Commissioner, thank you for your testimony. Thanks for your work. Carrie Johnson, I'll ask you to sit in the chair up there so you're all ready to go. And then Director McGinty, thanks for being with us. You can identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you so much, Chair and committee members. My name is Lauren Bennett McGinty. I'm the Director of Explore Minnesota. And thank you for having me today, and the opportunity to speak today, and thank you for all of your work on this bill and during what we all are calling an unprecedented session. I'm here to express strong support for maintaining funding for Explore Minnesota's budget as recommended by the Governor and Lieutenant Governor. The data is clear. Our state's tourism sector worked hard to achieve record numbers in 2023 and continue to grow in 24. In 2023, Minnesota welcomed a record number of visitors, marking a 4.6% increase from the previous year. These visits generated a total economic impact of $24.2 billion. Supporting the entirety of Explore Minnesota's budget will benefit your communities when they need it most. While Minnesota's tourism industry has recently seen new heights, it's important to recognize the broader context and that international travel has declined over the last several months. Now more than ever, we need to remain competitive in our region. Keeping our budget intact and all of our programs operational, including the new Explore Minnesota film, will ensure we can continue to see success in the coming year. Investing in tourism supports local economies by boosting small businesses, creating jobs, and enhancing community vitality. Additionally, film and television can raise awareness, positive awareness of Minnesota, attract business investment, and draw new residents and workers, creating a win-win for Minnesota and a high ROI. Many of the attendees here today are representing the state's film and television industry. All committee members have benefited from the programs that Explore Minnesota manages. Communities represented by this committee received nearly $200,000 in grants in FY24 alone. Additionally, many of your communities support film and television production, as several communities from Duluth to Jordan experience the economic benefits of production spending more than $1 million in just the last several years. Whether you represent a unique arts community with a symphonic orchestra, the many beautiful lakes, rivers, and parkways we hold dear, giant candy stores, shopping malls, the largest freshwater lake in the country, a substantial ski hill that doubles as a beautiful hiking area, the Spam Museum, a winery or brewery, and everything in between, you benefit from the work of Explore Minnesota. It is imperative that you continue to support Explore Minnesota and the Governor and Lieutenant Governor's recommendations so we can continue to tell your stories and drive economic growth in your communities. Thank you so much for your consideration.
And actually, Director, before you leave, I just have one clarifying question, and folks should feel free to do the same with other testifiers, which is just there's a film production tax credit that is on the books and that I'm not aware of proposal to change. Can you just, if film office is eliminated, what is the relationship with that, with the film production tax credit? How would that be used, if at all? If you can just talk about that point.
Sure, I can speak to that. Currently, the film department has 3 permanent full-time employees. Should all the funding for the film office be cut, the incentive program would go unspent, and it is set to renew every year, adding $25 million to be spent. So essentially, no new productions would be able to gain any sort of tax credit for their production in Minnesota, which kind of renders the entire program meaningless.
So it just sort of sits there. Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, Chair Baker, please.
And thank you, Mr. Chair, for bringing that up. Again, a question for you. As we talked about this kind of late, some of those late evenings about the film board and the office, can you tell us roughly right now what would it take just to keep the office open, just from that budget standpoint, to keep the office open?
It would take that full amount. That's actually a reduction in the total amount that was needed. And in fact, the film incentive operation, if you will, was at deed for quite some time, and it had 2 employees. We've actually reduced that down to 1 employee, and we have reduced the overall, I guess, investment in film since it became a film office. So at Minnesota Film and TV, the nonprofit, there were 3 full-time employees. Now we have 3 total. So you went from 5 employees down to 3 to make this office work. So it's really at its sort of bare bones to be functional at this point.
Chair
Thank you. I
Baker?
just look forward to maybe following up a little bit further for some more details about that before we wrap up. So before we wrap up the session, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Not seeing anything else. Our Director, thank you. And then I'll ask Daryl Dannon to make your way up front. And I am going to be pretty strict about the 2 minutes from now on, letting folks go a little bit past that. But so Carrie Johnson, please identify yourself and proceed.
Chair Pinto, Chair Baker, members of the committee, my name is Carrie Johnson. I'm the Director of State Policy and Field Building at the Minnesota Consortium of Community Developers, or MCCD. I want to thank you for preserving base funding in your omnibus bill for the Small Business Assistance Partnerships Program and the Emerging Entrepreneur Loan Fund. These programs are cornerstone offerings of DEED's small business programs, and through a competitive process, nonprofit economic development organizations contract with DEED to offer free small business technical assistance and affordable loan capital to entrepreneurs and small business owners across Minnesota. These programs help leverage additional private financing, especially from local community banks and credit unions. They create and preserve jobs and help strengthen Minnesota's overall economy. I do also want to offer that we are opposed to the A5 amendment of expanding eligibility of the Small Business Assistance Partnership Program without adding additional funding resources. We are already facing a $7.4 million budget shortfall from the previous biennium for this program, which will already impact the overall number of businesses that are able to be helped. Happy to answer any questions and discuss with you further offline. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today, and thanks again for your support.
And thank you for your testimony and for being here. Daniela Lorenz, if you can make your way up front, and then Daryl Dannon, please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Chair. Chair Pinto, Chair Baker, members of the committee. My name is Daryl Dannon, and I serve as the Executive Director of the Greater Minnesota Partnership. Thanks for giving me a little bit of time to reflect on your omnibus budget bill. So the Greater Minnesota Partnership is an organization focused on expanding economic opportunity in Greater Minnesota. We do that through advocating here at the legislature and working with our members, nonprofits, businesses, and whatnot in Greater Minnesota to expand and grow. And we're very, very concerned about a number of the budget cuts made in this bill. So those, I know they were mentioned by the agency, but the Job Creation Fund and the Minnesota Investment Fund, eliminating that funding for 4 years, we're anticipating pretty detrimental impacts. The contamination site cleanup and investigation grants, as well as the redevelopment grant program, those significant cuts included in your budget are gonna mean that we have properties that languish, that don't get cleaned up and don't get returned to productive use. And the Business Development Public Infrastructure Program, also a program utilized so businesses can grow and expand in Greater Minnesota. And I'm just gonna very briefly mention a number of key investments from MIF and JCF that were made in recent years. So New Tech Bioscience in Austin, Sodafel America in Duluth, Vortex Cold Storage in Albert Lee, New Flyer in Crookston, Cirrus in Duluth, Midwest Copac in Winona, Cato Engineering in North Mankato, SCR Solutions in Fergus Falls. So those kind of investments that were made in recent years, we will not have any dollars for the state of Minnesota to put towards those kind of expansion and growth investments. So I caution you to look at other ways to balance your budget, or obviously to work with leadership to navigate a higher target. So with that, members, thanks for letting me comment. And again, happy to work with members of the committee as you're considering your budget. I didn't acknowledge it at the beginning, but very aware of the very, very tough constraints that you're required to make, but wanted to make sure that you're aware that we think there'll be some pretty detrimental impacts for the long term if these cuts go through. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. I'll ask Robert Reedy to make your way up front, and Daniela Lorenz, please identify yourself and proceed.
Chair Baker, Pinto, and members of the committee, my name is Danielle Lorenz. I am testifying on behalf of the Economic Development Association of Minnesota, or EDAM as we're commonly known, about the proposed budget cuts that included in HF 2441. We are well aware of the difficult budget situation your committee is dealing with. However, communities use DEEDS programs every day to support projects that are key to the state's economic vitality. It is therefore concerning that HF 2441 makes cuts to the base funding for 2 key DEED programs, the contaminated site cleanup investigation grants and the redevelopment grant program across the next 2 biennium. In addition to my affiliation with EDAM and my day job as an economic development project manager and supervisor for the city of St. Paul, I've seen the critical role these grant programs have played in bringing projects to life. I could explain all day in concept the importance of these programs, but if a picture says 1,000 words, a building says at least 1,000,000. Recently, Soul Apartments, located at 176 Robert Street on the city's west side neighborhood, secured nearly $180,000 in DEED redevelopment grants, another $695,000 in contamination cleanup grants. This funding made it possible to clean up the site to make room for a brand new 176-unit housing community that is entirely affordable to households making 60% area median income, with 13% of units reserved for households making 30% of area median income. Without DEED's grant programs, it's very possible this project would have never happened. And Soul is just one example. For St. Paul alone, in the last 5 years, DEED programs have provided funding to projects that have leveraged millions of dollars in private investment, created hundreds of homes, thousands of square feet of commercial space, and removed harmful environmental toxins and contaminants from our environment. EDAM members work hard every day to make public investments that support good jobs and economic vitality. Funding these programs at the levels needed to sustain this work is critical to the state's future economic development success, and we urge the committee to reconsider the base funding cuts included in this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Asking Renee Dussman to make your way up front, and Robert Reedy, please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you. My name is Robert Reedy, Senior Director of Vocational Services at RISE, and I'm here on behalf of the IPS Provider Coalition, 22 organizations providing supported employment services to more than 1,100 Minnesotans each year. Recently, we were told by DEED to plan for just 4 more months of funding for the ESP program. After that, there's no guidance and no funding certainty. That limbo is destabilizing for providers and devastating for the people we serve. They are working jobs, pursuing recovery, and relying on us to show up. And now we are being told to prepare to disappear. As you can see in the letter we have submitted, we are asking you to include a few basic cost-effective provisions in the final omnibus workforce bill. If ongoing funding is out of reach this year, these steps will help prevent major service losses. In fiscal year 26, direct DEED to use the remaining $1.2 million in one-time ESP funds in fiscal year 26 only. Also, add $150,000 to supplement those funds. Together, that keeps over 30 people from losing IPS services. Also require 5% increase in DEED case referrals to community providers like ours. The evidence shows that IPS providers serve more people at lower costs. In fiscal year 27, allocate $1.5 million to preserve services for 300 to 400 Minnesotans statewide. Looking ahead, we urge the reinstatement of the DEED Community Rehab Advisory Committee and an annual report showing how ESP dollars are used and where VR referrals are going. It's not a big ask, but it will make a big difference. Without these provisions, we risk a collapse in access for people who are already working to rebuild their lives. Thank you for your time and for your continued partnership.
Thank you for your testimony, for being with us. I'll ask Jeff Tallison to make your way up front, and then Renee Dossman, welcome to you, and please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you. Renee Dossman, President and CEO of the Neighborhood Development Center. Thank you, Chair Baker, Chair Pinto, and members of this committee. Picture an entrepreneur standing in an empty storefront on University Avenue. They've got the vision, the hustle, and the community behind them. What they don't have is a loan, or a lease, or time to wait for a competitive grant. Then they find NDC. We don't say, apply and wait. We say, let's get you started right where you are. We help build their business plan, clean up their books, and even give them a loan to launch. In time, that same entrepreneur is hiring 8 of their neighbors, returning $52,000 to the local economy, increasing their income by $25,000, and contributing $32,000 a year in taxes. This isn't a one-off. It's our model. Last year, NDC supported over 800 BIPOC low-income entrepreneurs. Together, they generated over $10 million in tax revenue and sustained over 3,200 jobs. When you invest in NDC, you invest in each entrepreneur and in the future of Minnesota's economy. That's why we respectfully ask, please include an appropriation for NDC in this final bill. Direct appropriations let us respond in real time and in many ways. Over the years, we've used these direct appropriations to provide pass-through grants to build trusted community partners like the Cultural Wellness Center, Minnesota Fund, expand work in Greater Minnesota, Lower Sioux, Duluth, and St. Cloud, support pre-development of Frogtown Crossroads and Lake in Chicago, complete build-outs of Midtown Global Market, and launch our first ever food industry training program that's now in its 9th year. This flexibility is exactly what makes our model work. We are proud stewards of taxpayer dollars and grateful partners in building a more inclusive Minnesota economy. I want to thank you for your support, your prior support of NDC, your continued support of NDC, and grateful for you all. Thank you for this time.
And thank you. Thanks for your testimony. Thanks for your important work with NDC. We're grateful.
Thank you.
Michelle Dreyer, if you can make your way up front, and then Jeff Tallison, welcome to you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
All right, thank you, Chair Pinto and members of the committee. My name is Jeff Tollefson of the Minnesota Technology Association, and I'm here on behalf of all Minnesota businesses that rely on access to skilled talent in the science, technology, and engineering fields. And we're asking for you to reinstate funding for the proven SciTech internship program that MinTech proudly has been able to operate over the last 12 years. Since 2012, we have placed more than 3,300 interns in 672 companies in more than 150 communities across the state. In 2024 alone, we placed 255 interns in 123 companies in 53 communities. Notably, 64% of these interns were women or people of color, helping to diversify our STEM pipeline. Also worthy of note is that 84% of these students remain in Minnesota 2 years after getting their STEM degrees. It's truly a win-win-win program. Students gain access to hands-on experiential learning opportunities at small companies they may not otherwise have access to. Our small businesses are able to compete with the larger companies and offer an internship program and competitive pay where they get access to diverse talent. And in the end, it's really Minnesota that benefits as we build the technology proficient and skilled STEM workforce that we need to drive our innovation economy forward. In closing, I just ask that whether through a direct appropriation or the simple opportunity to compete for funding through expanded appropriation for the Minnesota STEM ecosystem, we hope you see the value of continued investment in this proven investment in Minnesota's future. Thank you.
Oops, thank you, and thanks for your work. Antonio Cardona, if you can make your way up front, and then Michelle Dreyer, welcome to you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you. And thank you, Jeff. Electrical Association members have made use of that internship.
Oh,
But to the committee, Chair Pinto, Chair Baker, and members of the Workforce, Labor, and Economic Development Committee, thank you for your opportunity to express our opinions regarding House File 2441, in particular provisions regarding increasing fees for electrical permitting and inspection. My name is Michelle Dreyer, and I am the Director of Membership and Government Affairs for the Electrical Association. The Electrical Association is a trade organization of over 250 electrical contractors located throughout the state of Minnesota. 71% of our membership have 7 electricians or less. The Construction Codes and Licensing Fee Alignment proposal enables the department to continue to provide timely and high-quality plan review and inspection services for electrical systems. According to Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry, operating at current funding levels with current workloads will delay in-person inspections by as much as 2 weeks. Delays in inspections could leave homeowners and businesses without electricity, as some utility providers will not re-energize a service until after proof of inspection. Delays in inspections may also bring construction projects to a halt until the mechanical work is inspected. Walls and floors must remain open until these inspections are completed, delaying work of other trades. If there are delays, such as I have just mentioned, the Electrical Association has concerns that there will be an increase in unlicensed, unpermitted work to avoid delays and prolonged power outages. Many handymen feel they are competent enough to perform electrical work without a license, but these individuals have not undergone the rigorous education and testing necessary to be a licensed electrician in our state. Electrocutions and fires are the result of unlicensed work. Please support the electrical fee alignments as proposed by Minnesota Department of Labor and Industry. The fees are reasonable and necessary to keep Minnesotans safe. I'd be happy to address any questions that you might have.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and along the way, of course, folks do have questions, let me know. But otherwise, thank you so much. And yeah, Tricia Reinwald, you're making your way up. And Antonio Cardona, welcome to you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Great. Antonio Cardona, Vice President of Career Readiness, a Project for Pride of Living. Thank you, Chair Pinto, Chair Baker, Vice Chair Mecklin, Vice Chair Greenman, and committee members. I appreciate the committee leadership's support of PPL this year and in previous years, and the conversations that I've had with many of you. At PPL, we live every day at the intersection of housing and jobs, providing 1,600 units of affordable housing and a suite of integrated workforce and education solutions. Housing and jobs are the 2 prerequisites to lift and keep people out of poverty and provide a foundation for self-determination. However, I'm not here to talk just about PPL's direct appropriation. I want to talk more globally about the necessary and critical role direct appropriations play in stitching together the statewide workforce ecosystem. There's been a lot of conversation on eliminating direct appropriations completely and moving to only competitive grants, which would be a mistake. especially since nobody has presented a plan for what happens when dozens of innovative and responsive programs across the state would have to shut down on July 1st. Deed competitive grants work well for broad and common approaches that can lead to systemic change, but usually require highly prescriptive and narrow program elements. And yet they are still a core and necessary component of nonprofit workforce funding. There also seems to be a broad misconception that a direct appropriation is somehow a blank check, which could not be further from the truth. Deed direct appropriations have the same accountability measures as competitive grants, negotiated contracts including performance metrics, monthly reimbursable grant structures, financial monitoring to ensure funds are used appropriately, program monitoring to ensure all rules are followed and metrics are measurable, and that each nonprofit has a third-party annual audit to ensure financial accountability and transparency. So my ask to you, in Minnesota, where we have multiple global corporations, plenty of resources, and still significant workforce needs, that you don't leave the most vulnerable in your districts behind, and that you trust vetted organizations that do this work in a more efficient way than government ever could. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here. Ask Tom Zhang to make your way up front, and then Tricia Reinwald, welcome. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Pinto, Chair Baker, and members of the committee. My name is Tricia Reinwald, and I'm from the Minnesota Metropolitan Alliance of Connected Communities, and we're a network of 65 nonprofit human service providers serving over 300,000 Minnesotans each year across housing, behavioral health, elder care, violence prevention, youth programming, and workforce development, contributing nearly $400 million in annual economic impact. We are proud to be transparent, accountable, regularly audited, and heavily invested in compliance. We appreciate your work on House File 2441 and your commitment to strengthening Minnesota's workforce. As an alliance of organizations actively delivering employment services, we know how impactful public investment can be when it reaches providers who are trusted by the communities they serve. As the bill moves forward, we ask that the committee keep in mind the importance of how grants are structured and awarded. We support and stand by transparency, accountability, and results-driven funding, but also believe that grant processes should be designed to maximize accessibility and effectiveness. Rigid administrative requirements can unintentionally shut out experienced providers doing deeply impactful, critical, and often grassroots work. Nonprofits welcome oversight, and it's essential to maintaining public trust and ensuring accountability. Direct appropriations and competitive grants are already subject to the same legislative grant management policies, including the pre-award risk assessment adopted in 2023, which we support. We want to deepen understanding among legislators about the vital role that nonprofits play in delivering services statewide. Stronger awareness can lead to more effective partnerships and more strategic use of both competitive grants and direct appropriations. We urge a balanced funding approach that reflects the full range of tools needed to meet Minnesotans' needs. Thank you for your time and thoughtful consideration.
Thank you so much. I'll ask Sydney Spreck to make your way up front, and Tom Zhang, please identify yourself and proceed. Welcome to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Tao Mei Xiong. I'm the Executive and Network Director for the Coalition of Asian American Leaders. And I just want to start off by saying, Tricia, that was a great testimony, and I wholeheartedly support what you said. I'm here today because I want to share what the Coalition of Asian American Leaders does. We are a network of 5,800 Asian American leaders throughout the state of Minnesota with a 10,000 membership of our allies, including our allies, it's 10,000. And so our deep reach and wide reach means that we can actually make really huge impacts. So I'm here today to talk about our small business grant program. Last year, we were lucky enough to receive a small grant from the state of Minnesota, and we just appropriated, we just got the names of the grantees. So there are 234 applicants for 20 grants. And it represents over 60 cities of the applicants and 23 different languages. It's rare to see that kind of reach for an organization our size. And so I said I supported Tricia's comments because I do believe both in competitive grants as well as direct appropriations. Additionally, the Coalition of Asian American Leaders has the infrastructure to re-grant and provide the specific needs of both before the grant application and after the grant application. And then when they become recipients, we also provide technical assistance and further help them to be able to access larger grant amounts so we move them forward and they don't stay with us. The goal is to help them build up and not remain grantees. I also want to share that Asian American women entrepreneurs are the fastest group of entrepreneurs in the country, but have the largest challenges with accessing financial institutions and support. And a lot of it is due to the perception that Asian Americans, and specifically Asian American women, do not have the skill set and or the know-how to be competitive entrepreneurs. We are debunking those stereotypes because the majority of our applicants for small businesses are actually Asian American women. In addition to that, I want to say that we are uniquely positioned to be able to reach out to a wide group of Asian Americans. Asian Americans in the state of Minnesota make 7% of the population, representing 40 different ethnic groups and languages. And so I hope that you will continue to invest in the Coalition of Asian American Leaders because we are having a huge and big impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. Thanks for your important work. Grateful to have you here. Tom Dicklage will ask you to make your way up front, and then Sydney Spreck, welcome to you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Co-Chair Pinto, Co-Chair Baker, and committee members. For the record, my name is Sydney Spreck, and I am a political affairs coordinator at the Minnesota Association of Professional Employees, or MAPE, which is a union of over 18,500 state workers across all of Minnesota's agencies, boards, and commissions. Thank you for the opportunity to share our concerns with the House's workforce budget bill. First, MAPE thanks the committee for including some funding for the vocational rehabilitation services at DEED, but we urge you to invest more. The mission of the VRS program is to empower Minnesotans with disabilities to achieve their goals for employment, independent living, and community integration by offering training and workplace accommodations. When people with disabilities get the support they need, they can obtain meaningful employment to the benefit of our communities and the economy. Without funds, DEED will have to lay off dozens of voc rehab counselors, which will leave hundreds of participants without a designated counselor to help them. While the appropriation of $5 million per biennium reflected in your budget bill is appreciated, it will not mitigate the majority of the negative impacts on the VRS program. The governor's revised budget allocates $10 million per biennium from the Workforce Development Fund to maintain this important program. Second, we are deeply concerned with the cuts to operating funding at DEED proposed in this bill. Operating adjustments funding ensures the agencies can retain experienced staff who run the programs created by the legislature. It takes significant staff and resources to maintain internal controls and oversight of programs. Cutting funding for agency operations leaves programs vulnerable to bad actors seeking to defraud the government because it forces the agency to do the same or more work with fewer resources year over year. MAPE urges you to invest additional funding in vocational rehabilitation services and in DEED's operating adjustment. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony and for your work. And then our last testifier, I'll ask you to make your way up front. I think that's Senator Cartier, and then Tom Dicklage, welcome to you. Please identify yourself and proceed.
Thank you, Chair Baker, Chair Pinto and Chair Baker and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Tom Dicklage. I'm the Executive Director of the Minnesota State Building and Construction Trades Council, representing over 70,000 union construction workers across the state. I'd like to begin by saying thank you for the including of a strong investment in combating worker misclassification in this bill. The construction industry faces staggering rates of misclassification, and our affiliates are on the front lines of combating this fraudulent practice. Thank you for your help in the efforts to eliminate misclass in our and every industry. We are also urging you to support the Department of Labor and Industry's proposed fee alignments for Construction Code and Licensing Division, which is not currently present in House File 2441's DE amendment. These adjustments are not just overdue, they're critical. Right now, DLI is warning that without this change, plumbing and plan reviews could take a minimum of 15 weeks. That's more than double the current average and 5 times longer than the industry's goal of 3 weeks. Electrical inspections, which now happen within 2 days, would face serious delays and reduced staffing, especially in greater Minnesota. These delays don't just affect contractors, they hit homeowners, small businesses, and communities trying to invest in local infrastructure. And the root of it is simple. The fees that support these essential services haven't been updated in nearly 20 years. If we don't act this session, the cost of inaction, project delays, stalled developments, and lost economic activity will far outweigh the modest increases these updates represent. We ask that the committee ensure these fee alignments are included in the final bill. Also of concern for our affiliates is the lack of funding for 3 marquee pre-apprenticeship programs, Building Strong Communities, Helmets to Hard Hats, and the Operating Engineers Pathways Program. Each of these programs help attract and prepare new talent to join the ranks of the building trades. The construction industry is the backbone of a healthy economy, and a robust workforce is required to keep Minnesota moving forward. We ask that you would include these programs as the bill progresses to final passage. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, for your work. And then our final testifier, please identify yourself and proceed.
Yep. Chair Pinto, Chair Baker, I'm Ryan Sancartier, Government Affairs Director for the Minnesota Contractors of the National Electrical Contractors Association and the Minnesota Mechanical Contractors Association. I've spoken to many of you on this committee about the importance of proposed construction codes and licensing divisions fee alignments and what the opportunity costs are for my contractors if they are not passed this session. To not be repetitive, I'll talk about how this will impact our customers. Passing House File 2441 without the CCLD fees alignments will cause an increase in construction costs for ordinary folks. I know that's counterintuitive, but DLI has made it clear that failure to enact the fee alignments will significantly reduce their staff capacity to review plans and conduct inspections in a timely manner. They estimate wait times for service to double in some cases and increase by 600% in others. I imagine that an entrepreneur looking to build out or construct their business would rather pay a marginal increase in fees for timely plumbing plan review than having to pay 2 to 3 extra months of large expenses such as property taxes, rent, and other costs associated with construction delays. All the while potentially not generating revenue due to the inability to open. While not easy to message that an increase in fees is a positive thing, it does seem to be the practical choice if it is our goal to empower ordinary folks to quickly and confidently build new housing, businesses, and other infrastructure that contributes to the cultural fabric and economic vitality of our communities and state. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And a big thank you to all the testifiers. Just one small point. Thank you all. You really kept it within the time limits, which I really, as facilitating this meeting, especially grateful for, but just more broadly for your work in all the different areas. There was a reference to, in particular for those representing nonprofits, there's a reference to there being some concern about nonprofits. I'll just say, speaking for myself, that I'm really grateful for the work of nonprofits and my own interest in moving to shifting, as is the case in the rest of the budget, towards competitive grants. As I've said many times in this committee, is not at all because of any lack of faith in the nonprofits doing phenomenal work. It's really more of a lack of faith in the legislative process to choose among individual organizations as opposed to setting policy goals and holding agencies accountable, state agencies, that is, accountable for meeting them. That's a broader conversation. But the point is, I want that not to at all be read as in any way criticizing or doubting the incredible work of the organizations that are doing this work all throughout our state, represented by many of the folks testifying here. So thank you so much. I also want to encourage all of you, both those who testified and others as well, to please be in touch with committee members. Those of us around the table are the people focused especially on these issues, of course. And as you identify points in our bill that Chair Baker and I brought out that you think should be changed, please be working with us directly. We appreciate hearing this testimony in public, of course, and as the bill moves through the process, I think both chairs and committee members are eager to hear from you and to talk with you about changes that can be made. Are there any questions members have? We'll move to amendments in just a second. Get back to your question, Representative Schultz. Questions, comments anybody wants to have before we do that? I'm not seeing anything. And so, Representative Schultz, to your question, I think so. Of course, the general process, right, is that there's, as budget bills are coming out, there's a markup process where members have the chance to review the work of the chair, or in this case, chairs, and offer thoughts for changes. And I think I've seen that in both committee and then certainly on the floor as well, including from folks who are on the relevant committees. I do think, having talked to some of the members planning to offer these amendments, that in most cases the plan is to offer and withdraw them. But to the extent that's not the case, we can certainly talk about that. But I think that that's the case in most of these. Do you have follow-up? Since you had asked the question, Representative Schultz, any follow-up on that at all? No? Okay. All right. So we're going to go to the A5 amendment first. We're going to go a little bit out of order, members. And I believe that Representative Johnson was going to offer that. And this amendment actually was referenced in the testimony, and I think there's also maybe materials that were going to be passed out relating to it. But Representative Johnson, you're moving the A5?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm moving the A5 amendment. This is kind of based on one of the bills that I had introduced, House File 2332, which was a direct appropriation to Rethos and their Main Streets program. The work that they do is they help with technical design assistance, some infrastructure things to help some of these businesses get up to speed with water lines, electrical, alley improvements, things like that. And in my discussion with them, just seeing if they were eligible for competitive grants, there was a couple areas where they might be, and what this amendment would do is add in to the small business assistance partnerships program and just add or to revitalize or strengthen downtown or neighborhood commercial districts, making them eligible for some of those competitive grants. So it was based more on the feedback that we had been giving some of our organizations that were coming in and looking for some direct appropriations to make sure that they would be eligible for some of those competitive grants if we are not able to do the direct appropriations. But like Chair Pinto said, I will withdraw that amendment.
Okay, Representative Johnson withdraws that amendment. I'll just make a comment that there'd been reference in testimony to a concern that this would, by expanding the uses of the grant program without increasing funding, that would actually cause less money to be available, right? This feels like a really good example of something where an organization's identified a competitive grant program that they could be eligible for with the tweak. We also want to make sure, though, that there's more funding that would go into such a program, which is part of the concern we've expressed. I guess I'd encourage all of us to be thinking about ways to have our competitive grant programs work more effectively. If in fact that ends up being a way that we go, we'll see. But we want to make sure the programs are working well. And this is an idea you had, Representative Johnson, which again would work especially well if there was more money in that program, which is a whole separate conversation. Okay, so the A5 is withdrawn. We'll see if any comments about that. Okay, then the A6, Representative Johnson, I believe that that's yours as well. So you're offering the A6 amendment?
Yes, Chair Pinto, I'll offer the A6 amendment. This just has something to do with some of the changes to the BDPI grant program. There was an addition and expansion of that grant to include plant-based industries. Some concern and questions about what and how far that would open it up, whether it would be cannabis, plant-based aviation fuel, other agricultural things like that, and what type of impact that would have on that grant program. We already know that that grant program has more projects than they do money, and especially with a cut to the base coming up this session as well. So this would just delay it out to get a better idea of what type of industries, what type of needs they would have in order to allow some of those projects that are in the queue to get funded as we go forward. But again, Chair Baker, I will withdraw that amendment.
Okay, the A6 is offered and withdrawn as well. And then the A7, I think, is a third amendment from you, Representative Johnson?
Yep. Thank you, Chair Pinto. I will move the A7. This one is specific to a couple of different parking structures in Duluth. These parking structures were built in conjunction with the state of Minnesota. And right now it's a shared revenue system where 50% of the proceeds or operating revenue it's split between the state general fund and then the city of Duluth. The city gets to take out the operational expenses as well as the routine maintenance expenses. And what this amendment would do would be add in depreciation so that each year the city of Duluth would set aside a certain amount to account for that depreciation for major repairs and ideally replacement at the end of the life of those structures. Those were bonding dollars that were used to build them. Ideally, what this would do is, although it would reduce some of the funding coming into the state through the general fund, that money being set aside will hopefully not make it so the city doesn't have to come back and ask for more bonding dollars in the future. But this is something we'll work on a little bit in the interim, make sure that people are a little more educated on the topic, including myself. It was a little bit of a late ask, so with that, I will withdraw it as well.
Okay, the A7 is withdrawn as well, and I'll certainly encourage you, maybe I'll say I've had conversation with Chair Baker about these and a couple other items as well, and I think these are things that we're considering might be able to make a move as the bills move forward and bill moves forward, and so Representative Johnson, I encourage you to be in touch with the chairs on that. That brings us to the A4 amendment, which I believe Representative Kozlowski is going to be offering.
Yes, Chair Baker.
Okay, Representative Kozlowski.
I'm sorry, Chair Pinto.
Oh, I think
To
you-
our co-chairs.
I think you're moving the A4 amendment, if that's correct.
Yes. Chair Pinto, the A4 amendment has to do with the cannabis programming in the bill. The cannabis market, I had the good fortune of being on the conference committee and working bipartisan fashion to bring this new industry online, and we know it's going to have significant economic growth in the coming years. And so this amendment is to, understand that we have haircuts coming. We set out with the Can Startup, Can Navigate, and Can Train to make sure that folks had the tools that they needed, whether it was workers or entrepreneurs or the community to succeed. And this is seeking to move the $3 million haircut that we took and trim that down to $2 million for the Can Startup. We know that it's a capital-intensive industry, but we also know that Can Startup and Can Navigate are very important, and so I would seek to move $500,000 into each of those programs over this biennium.
Thank you. My understanding, Representative Kozlowski, the total cut to cannabis programs would be the same, but it's just instead of there being zeroing out Can Navigate and Can Train and having full funding for Can Startup, $1 million from Can Startup would go to $500,000 to those other two programs.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
A little goes a long way.
Okay, thank you. And I think that your plan is, folks have questions or otherwise, but I think your plan is to withdraw that as well, but to hope to continue to have conversations.
Yes, and if I can just add that.
Please, yeah.
Chair Pinto, that's exactly it. I'm going to withdraw this and seek to have further conversations across the aisle. I know our chairs are engaged in this conversation and thinking through these as we're moving forward. The Can Navigate is really about how we help folks to get into this industry and make good, sound financial decisions. There's a lot of regulation, social, financial capital issues that go into this, as well as the Can Train as supporting workers as they're seeking to come in. So whether that's bud tenders or testers, drivers, scientists, trimmers, we need all these folks, and we want to make sure that they have every tool, the hands-on experience, the industry, whether that's through the Minnesota Cannabis College or St. Cloud higher education credential, or just hands-on training. That's going to make sure that folks get access to these good-paying, family-sustained jobs when they come into the market.
Thank you, Representative Kozlowski. So Representative Kozlowski withdraws the A4 amendment, but these amendments will continue to have conversations about as the process continues. Moving to the A2 amendment, I think Representative Berg asking you to move the A2.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the A2 amendment. And I just want to say quickly, we heard from DLI Commissioner Bissenbach about how important this fee increase is, followed up by the Executive Director of the Building Trades, Tom Dicklich, about how important this is. And while I can agree that raising fees is hard, I think that after nearly 20 years, when the contractors and the industry and the agency, everybody is saying raising these fees is necessary to get projects done on time, people in buildings, people in homes. This isn't just raising a fee for raising sake. This is incredibly important. So I just wanted to say that quickly. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Representative Berg. And I think I heard the Electrical Association speaking in favor as well, so quite a few. There may have been somebody else as well. This is out of my head right now. Chair Baker and I have had conversations about this, and I know it sounds like continuing to consider it as with the other four that we've had. I think, Representative Berg, your plan at this point is to withdraw this. We want to have continued conversation. I hope that we may be able to make some progress on this as the bill goes to its next stop or two. So Representative Berg at this time withdraws the A2 amendment as well, but these are all things that we are hoping that can be considered and get some movement on as the bill continues. So that brings us to the A1. Representative Frazier, I believe you're moving the A1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will be moving to A1, and this one will be taking a vote, and I would request a roll call.
Okay, roll call has been requested, Representative Frazier, so there will be one. Representative Frazier, to the A1.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is pretty straightforward. We've heard the testimony from Explore Minnesota. This would reinstate the $875,000 that was cut from the film office of Explore Minnesota. Reason being, we're at a time now where we should be looking for ways to produce revenue in the state of Minnesota, also looking for ways to bring positive attention to our state as well. And that's exactly what happens when we have these productions in our state. And the return on investment for these productions well outweigh the $875,000 that we would pretend to save by making a cut right here. Just for example, I'll talk about two productions. One, Love is Blind, which I'm sure many people are familiar with. It spent $1.9 million on hotels, restaurants, and event venues and other locations throughout the state. And then there's another production, Hope in the Water, which is produced by David E. Kelly, our own Andrew Zimmerman, and Martha Stewart. And it was nominated for a News and Documentary Emmy, as announced on May 1st. In this production, they spent $950,000 in wages, employed 21 individuals, and then it was a $1.2 million impact on the Minnesota economy. So clearly, the return on investment is greater than the $875,000 that we pretend to save by making the cut. So I would request a yes vote on this amendment to restore the $875,000 back into the budget.
Thank you, Representative Frazier. I do want to clarify something with staff. My understanding is that the $1.65 million cut would still be in our bill. It wouldn't change the bottom line at all. It would still come from Explore Minnesota. It would simply, this would sort of require Explore Minnesota to identify the cut as opposed to having it be that it be cut the film office. But if Ms. Shalene or Ms. Eng could clarify that.
Chair and members, yes, so the way this amendment is written, it would shift $825,000 from Explore Minnesota's operating costs to this program each year.
Okay. And so, Ms. Shalene, so that would essentially mean it would still be a cut of $825,000 per year, or $1.65 million total, from Explore Minnesota as a whole, but rather than being specifically to the film office, it would be cut from the funds in total for Explore Minnesota.
Yes.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure. Mr. Chair, Chair Baker.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing the amendment forward. And again, I think I'm not comfortable voting in favor of this today. I do know that, again, I was asking the director a few more questions about how does the office work. We didn't get into the minutia of how that was sort of being worked earlier this session. Again, it sounds like they've made the department or the office smaller, but yet $1.6 million is a lot of money for 3 employees or 3 or 4 employees. There's more other things baked into it, and I want to find out about that. So today I can't support the amendment. I do look forward to having further conversations with the director offline, Representative Frazier, so I hope that this is something we can bring up later, but today I would ask for a no vote.
All right, thank you, Chair Baker. I think we'll move to a vote unless anybody else has anything else they want to say. I'm not seeing, so we'll have the clerk take the roll, and the chair votes yes.
Chair Pinto, aye. Chair Baker?
No.
Vice Chair Greenman?
Aye.
Vice Chair Mecklin?
No.
Representative Bakenberg?
No.
Representative Berg?
Yes.
Representative Frazier?
Yes.
Representative Hussein?
Yes.
Representative Pete Johnson?
Yes.
Representative Wayne Johnson?
No.
Representative Kozlowski?
Yes.
Representative Mueller? Representative Schultz?
No.
Representative Zeleznikar?
Selesnikar, no.
And there being 7 ayes and 7 noes, the motion does not pass. The amendment is not adopted. Thank you, members. Hopefully continued conversation about that, as Chair Baker referenced. And then final amendment that we have is the A3. I believe Representative Greenman is offering that. Representative Greenman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I would also like a roll call on this vote.
The roll call has been requested. There will be one.
Thank you. What this amendment does is it simply takes out of the budget bill a partial repeal of the non-compete ban that is not necessary for the budget. It's not necessary for either of these departments, and it will in fact hurt hundreds of thousands of Minnesota workers. What I will say is we heard a bill about this. We laid it over. It didn't actually make its stops. It should have gone to Commerce, but that's not why today we should do this. This was something that came on. I think it held up the bill for 3 weeks. It held up our budget, and the price of keeping the lights on at our agencies that enforce worker protections and minimum wage laws, as well as administer UI and our lots of assistance to small business and our workforce, it ended up in this bill. And let me just talk a little bit about why I think you guys should join me in this today, and we can just take this out of the bill. We can send it to the floor on its own. This is a provision that the Minnesota Business Partnership has been the primary proponent of, and they are by their own volition, comprised of more than 100 CEOs and senior executives of the largest Minnesota employers in the state. And that is part of the problem with this, which is when we talk to employees, when we talk to white collar, pink collar, blue collar workers, what we hear about is the restriction on employment that prevents them from being able to leave their job for a better paying job, leave their job for a promotion, leave their job just because they have a bad boss or they want to make a change, have the freedom to change. We have a set of protections, pretty strong protections in Minnesota law to protect trade secrets, to protect non-disclosure agreements, to protect non-solicitation agreements. If you talk to any lawyers in that trade, it is a very active area of law. And the reason that big employers want non-competes is because it's a really helpful tool to keep people from leaving. It's a really helpful tool to keep people from going and starting their own business. And that's what all of the research shows. I encourage you to look at FDC's, the rulemaking they did. 97% of the comments that came from Minnesota were in support of a total ban like we have here. And the last thing I'll say is this has been law for a year and 10 months, so we're not talking about partial repeal or impacting workers that haven't had this. We are also not talking about the sky is falling. What we're really talking about is if we, in an economy that has been consolidated and rigged by both the bigger and bigger corporations, monopolies, we are seeing workers have less and less power at every level of that income spectrum. And so the reason I wanted to take a little bit of time to make sure that you understand what you're voting for is right now in Minnesota law for the last year and 10 months, we have said that you can't prevent an employee at whatever level from leaving to take another job. Now, you can ban them from taking lists, you can ban them from taking methods, there's a whole set of laws that protect the information, but what you can't do is ban their freedom of movement. And so this, to me, is a decision, if we're going to send a bill to the floor, that will make Minnesota, will repeal and walk back the rights for workers. It'll protect these biggest employers and corporations. It'll allow them to get bigger by controlling both the information and the entrepreneurship. But when I came to the legislature, what I came to do is to stand up for workers, to stand up for small businesses, to stand up for entrepreneurs, and to actually think about how we level the playing field and unrig the rules for those workers. So this is a vote to take this non-compete partial repeal out, send the bill to the floor. It actually would not change anything about current law. It would not change the budget at all, but it would be saying that we're going to stand up for the freedom for workers to be able to move and take a job they want. And we're going to stand up for those innovators who want to start and go on their own and have the ability to do so. So, members, I'd ask for a yes vote on this, and we could send it to the floor today without that repeal.
Thank you, Representative Greenman. Chair Baker.
Thank you. I would urge members to vote no against the A3 amendment today. I've had a chance to visit with a number of larger companies that this is important. And I've had a chance to visit with you, Representative Greenman, too, about this. Thank you for taking the time to help me understand sort of your drive on this. I know this was an important bill for you the last couple of years. Again, I shared with you, I think the DFL went way too far on this area of very complex matter of law and in corporate law. And again, that's my opinion, but also it's what I'm hearing when I visit with a lot of companies that thrive in Minnesota. There's a reason you put the grandfathering clause in, when it was passed a couple years ago, because you didn't want that sky to fall. But I believe that the sky is going to fall if we don't seriously address the idea of hitting certain salary levels to points of very technical industries. This is not about less than $100,000 salaries and those kinds of companies and the secrets that they have. The innovations happening in Minnesota is amazing. I also again, these kinds of tones where we've got the largest corporations and the successful CEOs somehow get a tone of like those aren't good people and they're not doing great things for Minnesota. But I always get this tone that it's about trying to fight for the workers. Well, that's what they're doing by creating jobs here in Minnesota so we don't lose them secretly and quietly when they go away, when we don't have the kind of corporate structures and tax policies and worker mandates that we keep setting up here. If we continue to erode the foundation of what makes good business sense and an economic engine in Minnesota, we will slowly lose them and we won't know what happened one day. And so for that, I oppose this. We're working still very hard to find some reasonable changes this year. We aren't quite there yet, but I think we're working on some language to get it there. But what we cannot do today is support this amendment, I believe, and I think this is just something that we're going to have to continue to work on very intensely. But I ask members to vote no.
We'll see if anybody else, I'll go back to Representative Greenman in a second, just seeing if anybody else has anything to say or ask. Representative Frazier.
I'm just curious, and thank you, Co-Chair Baker, for their points. But I'm curious, the issue that the business that you spoke with are trying to resolve, can you give me an example of where it has been an impact, where that thing has actually happened?
Chair Baker?
Thank you. I can give you a number of examples. Again, companies don't want to make this public. Companies are nervous that they just don't want to be out there trying to restrict their research and development teams and how much knowledge they give them. They're trying to make sure that they can still stay in the corporate world and stay focused on this. But large companies, for the most part, are asking us not to restrict these important non-compete laws where, again, it's been working very well here for many decades in Minnesota. Look at our tech foundation in Minnesota. The Medtronics and the 3Ms and those kinds of companies have done very well over the years without having restrictions with non-competes. So when we see this now coming, and all of a sudden in one legislative session, there's all of a sudden no non-competes can be signed. That's a major shift with that kind of a tone. And again, our governor is even trying to promote, tax credits for R&D in the state of Minnesota, and we should promote that with his policies that actually can give us the R&D credits that he wants as well. So there are things that we need to move along together to make sure both of these can work. So again, a number of companies are slowly finding ways of doing business outside of the state, Representative Frazier. Again, I don't want to use their names publicly, but I think you know me well enough. I'm doing my homework. I'm asking the questions because that is at an upper level that I don't even understand. But what does this mean to them? This is a real thing, and members, we have to pay attention to how this is going to affect us in the next several years. This will not happen overnight, but we have to protect their interests or our jobs will be losing. Our best jobs will be leaving Minnesota in the near future.
Senator Frazier, any follow-up?
Yeah, thank you, Co-Chair Baker. If it's not going to happen overnight, and this has only been in place for a little over a year, wouldn't it behoove us to then allow it to play out, to see what the issues actually are, and then be strategic and address those issues?
Chair Baker?
You would think that if you start letting it play out, but decisions in corporate boardrooms get made, and then there's no going back. When they start deciding where to start doing their next developments because the current law is X in a state that doesn't seem to want to promote what they're trying to do and they're best at what they're at, they're going to start making decisions. And then if we change our mind or if this isn't working so well, then it's too late. So that's the part of it, is that we lose that window of time when corporations are making big decisions, huge millions of dollars of investments to just even capital investments here in the state. We don't want to lose any of that. So just to kind of say, well, let's just see how it goes, we're not listening to our people that are actually doing the job, and that's what we need to do a better job of here.
Representative Frazier, any follow-up?
No, Mr. Chair.
Okay. I've got Representative Berg and Schultz on the list. Representative Berg, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Frazier asked my question, but I'll just say it's really disappointing to hear the discussion of, centered around the DFL went too far and big corporations and big companies. What we're here to do is to make life and opportunities for workers better. They are the backbone of our state and our country. And I think ruling out this amendment simply based on an argument that favors big corporations and the DFL going too far is not unexpected from that side of the aisle, but really disappointing.
Thank you, Representative Berg. Representative Schultz, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm certainly learning a lot about this and looking forward to the continued dialogue about this. I kind of think that regardless of what happens on this vote right now, I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the other bill later today. And so when thinking about this topic, I guess I'm left with one question. If I'm understanding correctly, there's 4 other states that have a similar ban, and one question that I would have would be, is Minnesota's the most restrictive? And if it is the most restrictive, let's consider that amidst the fact that we have a whole bunch of employers across the state who are doing a lot of investment, spending a lot of money to grow, to provide new technology and research and new products. And certainly that's a benefit to Minnesota, a big benefit to our state budget. And to the idea that's been thrown out around the table that, well, you know, let's just wait and see what this 2023 law does. What if that results in one of our major employers choosing to do their research and development in an entirely different state? Many of these businesses and companies and employers have the flexibility to do so. So for us, are we going to use the government to tell private business that you're going to have a certain environment here that's going to disincentivize you from having your research and development here? And are we going to lose out as a state on that investment? Because to Representative Frazier's point on a previous amendment, isn't that investment that we want to have here? Aren't those the jobs that we want to have here? And I think that's the open question for us around this table. And I think that we should work together on this topic so that we aren't disincentivizing more investment in our state.
Thank you, Representative Schultz. I think we'll have Representative Greenman say whatever she wants to in response to that first question as part of her close. I'm not seeing anybody else. So Representative Greenman, final words to you.
Thank you. And just so that we're clarifying this correctly, what you're asking is it the least restrictive law? Because what we're talking about is a restriction on workers, on employers. It's not a restriction on companies. It is a restriction on whether or not a person can leave and go to another job, sometimes for a year or 2, sometimes for in a geography. There's a whole long jurisprudence. And I appreciate and appreciate our conversations. I actually am very familiar with this law. I did some of this before I got here. And what I know is that the more you have different standards, different laws, it creates a cottage industry for lawyers. There are lots of lawyers making lots of money off of companies suing each other, off of advising, off of trying to make these updated every year so that they have bills to charge for. But that's not good for our economy. It's not good for our workforce. One of the states that has had this law for 100 years is California, and it's not Silicon Valley did not come up despite it. It came up because of it. Because of people were moving to different places, because people were starting startups, which are now giant companies. And the startup economy is something that the state is trying to protect. In Minnesota, we have done a good job with headquarters, but actually we are lagging behind. Part of the reason we need some of these tax credits and other things is the innovators economy is not one of our strong suits. And one of the things we need to do is ensure that and we need to protect workers who are making under $100,000 who don't have any power, bargaining power. But workers who make $200,000, if you're working at any of these companies, also don't have much bargaining power. CEOs are actually protected in this bill because it wouldn't let us, in the law that exists, it wouldn't let you have a non-compete on them either. The thing is, if you're a CEO and you're negotiating your severance and your like buyout package, whatever, you have a lot of power in that relationship. Folks who make $200,000 a year, folks who make $100,000 a year, folks who make $50,000 a year don't. But I want to come back to the reason that these big employers say they need it, is they're saying what they need is to protect trade secret information, to protect information that has value by being kept secret. And I have been asking for a year and 10 months, well, before the bill was passed, but the year and 10 months, this has been law. I have said privately, publicly, in committee, off the record, bring me one of those companies who's had an issue with that, that the trade secrets law, that non-disclosure law, that non-solicitation law won't fix. And trust me, as somebody who's worked on a lot of other issues, I've had a lot of companies come talk to me directly. Amazon spent a lot of time with me when we were doing their warehouse worker bill. The junk fee ban, I talked directly with a lot of companies. But on this, privately, I have not been able to have that conversation. To me, that's because if you look at the history of non-competes, is people don't want to say the quiet part out loud, which is it's very helpful to have a tool that you can restrict someone from leaving for a better pay because then you don't have to pay them more. Or it's very helpful to have a tool that even when they're laid off, you can keep them from moving. And we saw comments about that. The non-compete, you can enforce whether or not they left voluntarily. And so that's a tool. It's a tool that lots of folks have, but it's our job just to make sure that we are actually protecting the free movement of labor, that we are actually protecting not just the employers, but also the economy. And this, again, I don't think we need to wait and see. I'm going to disagree with both of my colleagues because it's been law for a year and 10 months. And we actually, not only have we not seen the sky fall, we have not seen, even when this bill was up, one single anecdotal story. And so to me, we actually have facts on the ground, which is I am hearing from a lot of workers who've said this is actually meant that I can go to a different place. It meant I can start my own business. I've heard from some of your constituents who called and just said thank you. But the last thing I will say is this is a function of our political process that this is a wide, diffuse benefit to a lot of people. But there's not a trade organization, there's not even a labor union who is representing these workers. But the concentrated power of these biggest employers is very, very clear under the dome. It's clear under the dome that this has been a conversation from the beginning, not because anybody here today testified about it, but because the most powerful companies in Minnesota want it. And so it's in our bill. And so to me, that's something that I think we should think about as we move forward about who these bills are for and who we're listening to, even if they can't pay a high-priced lobbyist to lobby all of us and get it in the bill. So with that, members, I'd ask you to vote yes to take this out of the bill. Let the law as it exists protect all Minnesota workers, and please vote yes.
Representative Greenman, thank you for your work on this. We'll have the clerk take the roll. The chair votes aye.
Chair Pinto votes aye. Chair Baker. No. Vice Chair Greenman.
Aye.
Vice Chair Mecklin.
No.
Representative Bakeberg.
No.
Representative Berg.
Yes.
Representative Frazier.
Yes.
Representative Hussein.
Aye.
Representative Pete Johnson.
Yes.
Representative Wayne Johnson.
No.
Representative Kozlowski.
Yes.
Representative Mueller.
Mueller votes no.
Representative Schultz.
No.
Representative Zalesnikar.
No.
And there being 7 ayes, 7 nays, the motion fails. The A3 amendment is not adopted. That brings us to the bill, or to the A25-0074 amendment, which we'll get to. Members' discussion to the bill. See if any of our members want to say anything. We do not have a hard stop at 10, though we're also not going to deliberately drive well past 10, just so we'll give them, but just, we'll see. Chair Baker, Representative Hussein, you want to say something? Representative Hussein, about the bill. Okay, Representative Hussein, to you.
Thank you, Chair Pinto and committee members. I just want to thank for all the testifiers who came out today for share their stories and tell us that why it's just important for our nonprofits that are doing a great job to be funded. Today, I just want to talk about something deeply and personal, the life of the people that I represent, and why workforce development is not just a policy, it is a survival. I grew up in this community, and I have seen the struggle up close. The District 65A, many of family that lives in below poverty and $14,000 and less. That's not just a low income, that is the below bottom. There are families that are doing everything right, but still falling behind, and they are not asking for handout, they're asking for opportunity. I recommended, as I see a young man who came to my office and determined to find a work and willing to learn, but with no access to job training, the door was closed. Not because of this ability, but funding was not available. And many of those organizations that there's a direct appropriation and asking for those is they help a lot in my district and throughout the state of Minnesota. For not as funding for those nonprofits that does a great job within the community and in state of Minnesota, we just gonna fall behind in the lack of jobs and job opportunities. And many of those organizations are not getting funding throughout the state. They're also getting cut from federal funding. And that is gonna tell them for those organizations to close and shut down. And those people who's gonna struggle is the people of the Black and brown communities. I have, without supporting of this level, we risk in losing them for good. That's why I am urging that full funding of the workforce direct appropriation is not just budgeting, it is promising that we will not abandon for those people who have already been left out for many years. That we will say yes to job skills, yes to for dignity, and yes to economic justice for those young kids that really needed opportunities. This is how we left up Black and brown communities, immigrant families, and youth. Not empty word, but with real investment. And that's why I'm urging for our committees to kind of take a look at it and funding for those nonprofits that have been doing a great job within our communities. No family in Minnesota, no child should have been growing up under poverty and not having the job skills, not the trainings that they need. And without that, I will encourage both chairs and committee members to reconsider and invest for those nonprofits that's been doing it great job for many, many years. I understand that we do have a concern about, fraud, but we put a lot of laid out, and we put a lot of work in Indeed, and nothing has been released easy. It takes time. Nothing is just, like when nonprofits asking, they provide a lot of documentation. They provide a lot of informations. So let's make a difference and let's make it together and invest for those people that really need it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Representative Hussein. And we'll get to Representative Frazier. I just wanted to make sure to note, as you're referencing about the use of workforce development funds, and just to make sure to encourage members of the public, and certainly I know members of this committee will do this as well, to be urging as budget negotiations continue. I mean, so much of what's causing our budget to look the way that it is because of the $50 million cut and then not being able to spend anything from the workforce development fund. So certainly anything that folks can do in terms of raising up the value of the fund in general, because that's really the massive squeeze that we're under. More to say, I suppose, with Representative Frazier to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Hussain, for your comments. And I just wanted to add to that because he mentioned the idea of this. I know we're in this moment where some folks are talking about fraud and abuse and waste all the time. With the Workforce Development Fund, to organizations that we have done direct appropriations to, I want you to hear this because you're in the room and know that you should not be put in that frame at all. There have not been accusations of fraud from those organizations that have received direct appropriations in the time that I've been in the legislature. So I wanted to put that on the record so you all hear that from us, that you should not have been put in that frame. I apologize for this idea or thought or narrative around that, considering the great work that you all have done. And I'm looking forward, we know what's coming from the Senate. I'm looking forward to engaging in a conversation on how we can ensure that we are looking to work with those organizations. You all have done great work, and I want you all to hear that too. And we know from the testimony that we've heard from our agencies that administer these funds, they cannot operate in those spaces effectively as you all have done over the years. And we want to ensure that our communities are getting what they need to ensure that they can continue, that you all continue to be successful because you're making our community successful as well by doing the work that you do. So thank you for the work that you do, and we will continue to work on this to ensure that we have something different than what's in this bill now. Thank you.
Representative Frazier, thank you for those comments, and I agree with you. I was trying to say that before as well, that our nonprofits are doing incredible work, and that certainly my own interest in making that shift is not at all criticism of them, and it's extremely frustrating that they're being lumped in that way. Representative Greenman, to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I just wanted to say to both of our co-chairs, the one piece of this bill that actually does deal with fraud, the misclassification fraud piece, and particularly the enforcement, the additional enforcement, is going to be really helpful and important. And I know it's something that Co-Chair Baker, Co-Chair Pinto, and I have both talked a lot about. I think giving DLI the resources to do that, and then thinking about how we actually measure and evaluate what's happening across our economy as it relates to people who are being misclassified as employees that should be, as independent contractors that should be employees. And so I really appreciate, as it relates to the work on the Fraud Prevention and Government Oversight Committee, which 3 of us are on, the one piece of this bill that actually really does relate to that and reply to that work, I think has bipartisan support. It's in the bill by definition. And so just really appreciate that it's in there and think it will make a big difference to workers. So thank you.
Thank you. Looking to see anything else before I go to Chair Baker. And I'm not seeing any members, so Chair Baker, to you, sir.
Yeah, and thank you, members. I really appreciate the season of our committee mornings. This is sort of kind of the final one, I think, at this point. I know Chair Pinto is not as high of a fan of mornings
not a
as
morning.
I am,
Yeah, no.
but I do appreciate this, and I will miss this in time because, again, I really enjoy the camaraderie, but also the conversations that we have had, whether we agree or disagree. But every one of the members here have had the chance and have brought bills in front of us. And many of us have listened, and we have bipartisanly sometimes agreed to things that aren't always the easiest thing to do. Mm-hmm. But we have been delivered a mission and a marching orders to work together. And we did, I think, a pretty good job here, Chair Pinto. And I think I'm pretty proud of a lot of things that we have done here. To the folks that, again, are disappointed in some of the cuts right now, we made more than $50 million in cuts because we had to refill some of the back noise and some of the back holes that were created by VRS services, for example. The vocational rehab stuff is a really big deal. And I have been hearing from providers around the state of Minnesota that this was not planned out very well at all from the agency. That was a problem. We had to find deeper cuts in other areas so that we could backfill that we shouldn't have had to do. And I think that's also part of what hurt us. I did not want to cut the Minnesota Investment Fund or the Job Creation Fund. Those are very good things that we have done in the state of Minnesota. We don't know what our future targets will look like just yet. We do know things are different because, as Chair Pinto said, we didn't have any workforce development funds to work with at all. So we were really given a very, very narrow scope here. I look forward to next stops. I look forward to, just in a few hours, we're going to be in front of the Ways Committee describing the best of what we have here. Again, I think that our mission was youth was important. Youth work partnerships are part of our bill. We've got some good things in here. Again, we put some money back in for the VRS stuff. And again, we're continuing to listen, and we aren't there yet, but we are running out of time. We do have a couple weeks left. I do expect our emails and our visits will get even more intense. If you're on the committee, please feel free to make sure that we know what's going on. And again, I assume that Chair Pinto will say some of the thank yous to our staff and things. I don't want to miss that. I just know I'm so grateful for so many of the people here that make our world better with the committee work. Again, just from our partisan side, Spencer, Indy, and Ann, our GOP partisan folks. Again, Travis and Sally over there, and then, Mr. Carl, you have been just a great champion, and of course, our nonpartisan Ashley and Anna have been amazing. And then I know we're going to do a shout out for Riley. I think Riley's the best page in the whole world, and I know that that's something that we're going to do too. But I want to thank everybody for bringing us to this point, and I hope that we do get a lot of bipartisan support to get it moving along, and we'll continue to work on the bill. So thank you again, Mr. Chair, for working with us. I think we have a good product, and you're right at the beginning. It's not how it would have been if I was chair or if you were chair,
Right.
because we would have had a much different bill if we were that way. So we'll just continue to work. Thank you.
Chair, and I'll note it's not the bill would have been if we had not had that $50 million cut target and the Workforce Development Fund being not available to us. So there are a lot of constraints here. I'll maybe highlight, as Chair Baker said, we made cuts beyond the $50 million because of recognizing we didn't have access to Workforce Development Fund, making some investments. But in particular, one thing we tried to do was to put some additional funds into several competitive grant programs, Pathways to Prosperity, Support Services, and Youth at Work with the language change to broaden, to kind of provide an indication of where we would go, recognizing that's a rough draft. And again, really looking for input from organizations to make programs work as well as possible. And to the extent that you say, boy, we feel like direct appropriations work better for this reason, let's have a conversation about that. Because again, I want to make sure that we're not misunderstood sort of for why we're doing what we're doing. Because again, I'll say for myself, it's not about a lack of faith in nonprofits at all. I'm doing powerful, powerful work. It's about a lack of faith in this process, essentially, and happy to talk further about that. I think we can be proud about where we are. Chair Baker thanked the members of the staff individually, and I'll just provide that general thanks to them and members of this committee as well, members of the public. Please continue to be in touch with us, following up on some of the suggestions that Representative Johnson and others made about the bill. Keep those suggestions coming for us to work together. So with that, Chair Baker renews his motion that the A25-0074 amendment be adopted. We're going to do that first. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, that motion passes. And next, he again moves that House File 2441 be re-referred to the Committee on Ways and Means. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Okay, and that motion passes. And Chair Baker, I think that's it for now. Thank you so much to everyone. With that, our meeting is adjourned.